Senator Moran, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure to be with you. Thank you, especially on this important day.
Oh, very important. I'm here at the UN, where the U.S. has basically pulled the plug on the treaty, saying we need more time if you plan to get this right. And Tom Countryman told the conference that the administration doesn't have time to address the remaining problems. Your reaction when you hear that?
In my view, that is wonderful news, and it's wonderful not for me specifically. It's wonderful for law-abiding American citizens who, in my view, had nothing to gain and a lot to lose from any United Nations treaty dealing with firearms. And while we've tried to convince the administration not to pursue this path at all, when that failed, we have tried to convince the Secretary of State, the President, that any treaty that comes back to the United States Senate for ratification that intrudes upon the Second Amendment rights of American citizens will not receive enough votes to be ratified.
Yeah, and they say that's for now, but they say it's, the UN by no means has given up on this treaty. But as you were talking about, you've really led the charge on letting the president know this treaty will go absolutely nowhere if it includes civilian ownership. And you really have to wonder whether that had an impact on what the U.S. delegation did here today.
Well, just this week, another letter signed by 51 United States senators, mostly Republican, but including 8 Democrats, indicated that the treaty, at least the draft version that we were able to see, was not satisfactory and that would not garner the votes in the Senate. And of course, 51, it takes 2/3 of the United States Senate to ratify a treaty, and 51 senators already saying that the direction you're going will not work. Certainly, I hope that had an effect upon the Obama administration and particularly Secretary Clinton and our representatives at the United Nations. But I also know that the grassroots efforts by NRA across the country and citizens who care strongly about this issue, and I have no doubt in this time of election politics that the timing is such that the pressure that was placed upon the administration had an effect.
Yeah, and I would tend to agree with you there. We're talking about the November election. And, Wayne LaPierre, the NRA's Wayne LaPierre, was here a couple of weeks ago when he stood there and he said, hey, look, you ask us to trust you. How can we trust you? You tell us this isn't about taking away our firearm freedoms, put it in writing, but they won't do that. And he basically said, it's hands off when it comes to our firearm freedoms.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the message that the 51 senators sent this week to the president and to Secretary Clinton, as well as the letter that we started with months ago, outlining our concerns with the process, the message was if this affects the rights and freedoms of Americans under the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution, this treaty is dead on arrival in the U.S. Senate. And I did not ever foresee how they could negotiate a treaty that would be satisfactory, particularly when we are negotiating with countries who have no similar kinds of respect for the ability to possess, own, and utilize firearms for private citizens. So we were dealing with a number of countries that I'm sure wanted to go a different direction than what certainly the United States Senate would find satisfactory.
Absolutely. And even though we have this new development, you saw the draft that they were working with, and you had lots of concerns about what you saw in it. Some of those concerns, tell us about it.
Well, those concerns from the draft treaty, the transportation of firearms within a country, within the borders of the United States, the potential for record keeping, of keeping track of who purchases firearms or ammunition, the concern that it's so broad, and in fact the only reference toward gun owner rights was in the preamble, which traditionally has no legal value, no merit in protecting the rights. And we made some specific suggestions to the administration in their negotiations that any treaty must include the explicit recognition of the legitimacy of hunting, sport shooting, and lawful activities with firearms, that the manufacturing, assembly, and possession, transfer of light firearms, or light weapons and ammunition, related materials that are defined under domestic law as permissible, could not be affected by this treaty. And we wanted the treaty to express the inherent right of all states to individual or collective self-defense. So we outlined in our letter this week to President Obama the things that we found objectionable to the treaty draft as we, at least the best we knew it to contain, and as well as specific suggestions that if it ever has a chance of being ratified, it's got to do a lot more in proactively, in aggressively, and explicitly protecting the rights of American citizens.
Senator,
this is about freedom and liberty.
It is about freedom and liberty, no doubt about that. And as you said, you sent several letters to the president. Have you ever heard back from the administration in response?
We have certainly not heard back from the letter this week, but the earlier letter that kicked this effort off was responded to by Secretary of State Clinton, by the State Department. And of course, the administration in that letter has acknowledged that they would not approve a treaty that impedes upon the Second Amendment. And I appreciate them stating that. We wanted to make certain that that was the case. And again, this Obama administration, as compared to the Clinton or Bush administration, agreed to begin these negotiations. And while they were saying they would never do anything to intrude upon the Second Amendment, a couple of things. That would suggest that they probably shouldn't be negotiating this kind of treaty at all. And secondly, as we know, there are those who want to define the Second Amendment in ways that are not the original words from the United States Constitution.
You know, and as I said, there's been a delay here, but the U.S. administration did say, quote, we do want to join consensus and ratify this treaty. We just want to do it right. So that, along with President Obama now calling for tougher background checks, hinting at reinstating the assault weapons ban, do you have any doubt what we're in for if he gets 4 more years?
Well, no, I think, again, the consequences of this election are significant in a number of arenas, and it is I have no doubt that there are those that surround the president, as well as the president himself, who have an agenda that many Americans would find unacceptable when it comes to the freedom and liberties guaranteed by the Second Amendment.
And so your message to gun owners, this is good news as far as the delay, but it's not over here at the UN when it comes to United Nations, who is determined.
I think that's absolutely the case. We can never let down our vigil in protecting American freedoms. And while perhaps this has fallen apart at the moment at the United Nations, this administration and other countries around the world still want to negotiate a treaty. And again, I just don't know how you could ever predict that anything good would come for American citizens from such a treaty.
Not when you look at who else is sitting in that room. You're talking about Syria, Iran, some of the worst human rights abusers, and they talk about how this is about stopping human rights. But you know that this treaty would never do that.
Well, again, we're dealing with countries that have no guarantees, and the countries that you name, you can see the consequences. It demonstrates once again the value and importance of the United States Constitution's Bill of Rights in protecting the American citizens and making our country a unique place in the world, a unique nation. We have a lot to be thankful for, and it comes from the founders of our country who drafted the Constitution and added 10 additional amendments to protect the rights of American citizens. And as a result, we are a special place in the world.